Hello everyone, and welcome back to TSW2, where today we're trying out the Ruhr-Sieg Nord route. Of course, this locomotive is the DB BR143. Yes, we're currently at Finnentrop, which is the southern end of this TSW route, although in the old train simulator version, from what I gather, actually went a lot further south than Finnentrop and all the way to Siegen. So why DTG didn't remake the entire route in TSW is beyond me. Right. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to, making sure that I've actually got this thing set up properly. Okay, the lights are alright, but that's the other thing with this route, is that I think it is one of the oldest German routes in the game, and I was a bit surprised to see that it doesn't appear to have any sort of brake key. Doesn't appear to have any sort of it appears that it doesn't give you time, or that when you launch into a passenger service in timetable mode, it doesn't give you any time to, or you don't get to initially open the doors at the first station before you have to shove off. And regarding this BR143, from what I understand, it made its TSW debut on this Ruhr-Sieg Nord route. And actually, I'm going to try and get a screenshot with that old, what I think is a signal box. Yep, that'll do. That'll probably go on the thumbnail if I remember to use it. But yeah, as I was saying, this DB BR143, from what I understand, that yard's looking awfully empty, did originally come with this route. But more recently, DTG decided to include it, or essentially reuse the engine without really making any significant changes with Nachfolger Dresden. So it's somewhat ironic that I got the original version after it's the second rendition. So it's somewhat ironic that I got the original version second. Anyway, I am cutting the power because even though we're going on down a fairly shallow gradient, we still have the potential to pick up speed, or to even when we don't really want to. And that's the other thing with this route, is that most of the way it's pretty slow going. I did drive on it yesterday, going south from Hagen to Finnentrop, and in that instance it was a southbound passenger service, where I was driving from the Doppelstockwagen cab car here. And that shouldn't say, is it nicht einsteigen? I'm pretty sure that translates to do not board or not in service, but please do correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm afraid I can't speak German, and my pronunciation for most German words is pretty much shot at this point, even though I am slowly learning. Anyway, yeah, it was a run from Hagen to Finnentrop, but I was in the cab car, and it had the locomotive at the other end. And I found that the way the locomotive and cab car thing is arranged on this route is like a reverse of Caltrain, where they have the cab car at the northern end and the locomotive at the southern end. But in the case of this route, which I can already tell is really quite nice looking for the most part, has it the other way around, with the locomotive at the northern end. But yeah, this route for the most part is very slow going. I mean, the highest speed that you can get up to is only 120 kilometers an hour, put it that way. And I think normally in Germany the trains can get up to at least 160 without having to use any truly fancy system, or like in-cab signalling like LZB. Although saying that, I don't even know if LZB is was technically a signalling system, because I thought it was just cruise control, or some form of cruise control at least. Hello, there's a timber yard. I didn't notice this. Yesterday. Mind you, excuse me. Yesterday, when I was doing the southbound run, I didn't notice that. Well, it was earlier in the morning than what I've set this run to, and there's a lot more crossings on this route than I noticed before. But yeah, when I did that earlier run, it was a lot darker, to say the least, and I could barely see what any of the surroundings were. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it, of course, because I certainly did. And yeah, so this Ruhr-Sieg Nord route, I think it's about 61 kilometers long, or at least that's what I saw of it yesterday. And the main thing I remember about it is that even though this is the older route, it is a direct continuation off of Rhine-Ruhr-Osten, which is Wuppertal to Hagen. But unfortunately, they're not like linked together as one route. So theoretically, you couldn't drive from Wuppertal Hauptbahnhof down to Finnentrop all in one shot. You'd have to load up Rhine-Ruhr-Osten, then drive out of probably a DB BR143 or some freight engine and do the Wuppertal to Hagen run, and then exit out of that route, load up RSN, and then continue south with the Doppelstockwagen cab car and BR143, or a freight service if that takes your fancy more than passengers. Although in my case, I prefer passengers, mainly because I find that with passenger trains, they're obviously because they're so much lighter than freight, it's a lot easier to handle in terms of like acceleration and braking, and I guess in some cases even making sure you don't break the speed limit when you're going down a steep incline. Speaking of which, that's one of the reasons I don't like the Clinchfield Railroad. Because from memory, there's quite a few steep grades on that route, and it's very, very hard to control heavy freight trains and making sure they don't break the speed limit. Something I've just realised I've forgotten to mention this whole time is that this service that we're driving today is called RE16, and it's set in timetable mode that it was just Siegen Hauptbahnhof to Hagen Hauptbahnhof. But I think once I've finished this run, I will try to, or I think I'll look into it to try and work out if that is just if in real life RE16 does just go from Siegen to Hagen. Although saying that, if Dovetail were aware of Siegen's existence, then why did they not remake the whole Hagen to Siegen route in TSW? Anyway, yeah, the station. So this RE16 is kind of like almost like an express service along this route, even though it still just uses the same even though I think it's just the same BR143 and Doppelstockwagen coaches for all passenger services on this route. This one's kind of an express service since we're only stopping at 3 intermediate stations before we get to Hagen, and so the stations that we're stopping at today are Plettenberg, Werdohl and Letmathe. I can't apologise enough if I've butchered those names, but as I seem to recall, as I remember saying in my more semi-recent Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr video, I do apologise for any botched German pronunciation. It's really not a strong point on my end. But like Welsh pronunciation, that's a completely different kettle of fish, of course, but it's still a whole load of names that are pretty much notoriously difficult to pronounce unless you're Welsh, or unless you're familiar with the Welsh language. I should should have said that way the first time, and I do apologise if I've offended anyone. So yeah, I did look up how to pronounce these names of Plettenberg, Werdohl, and Letmathe, and that's something else. I kind of wish that, although it's very unlikely we'll ever see it, I kind of wish that Dovetail would perhaps consult German players or just German people in general, and then provide almost like a pronunciation dictionary, if that's the right way to if that's the right term. But I think there should be not necessarily. Wait, no, it's not. It's not Dovetail's job to educate people on how to pronounce these names. I'm just saying, especially when there's it's easy enough to look up pronunciation on the internet. Anyway, we're coming in on Plettenberg, and we're a little bit late, which doesn't really surprise me at all. Frankly, sometimes I find it quite difficult to run to time when I'm driving on these German routes, and I've found that multiple units, like the DB BR143, or I guess in the case of Rhein-Ruhr-Osten, the BR142, I find that they're much easier to handle than, in terms of acceleration and braking, than locomotives like this, especially really old. Well, they're saying that I remember this is a particularly old design, although don't quote me on that because I don't really know much about the history of the railways in Germany, let alone their locomotives. If anything, I think I know more about the history of the ice trains than anything else. One thing's for sure is that you certainly wouldn't get an ice train on this route. Actually, that's the point. I'm going to see if I can switch the coach interior lights on from the locomotive. That's one thing I've never understood about these trains and I guess even locomotive hauled coaches and TSW too, is that more often than not I see the interior lights for the inside of the coaches as being off by default, and I think that's really quite annoying, because one of the things I don't like about TSW is that more often than not you don't get any time to, or you don't get any decent amount of time to set up your locomotive or train before you have to get it moving, especially on the Bakerloo line with the London Underground 1972 stock. And that issue is especially notable when you start at Harrow and Wealdstone, because you have about a minute and a half to somehow set up the train and pull forward into the platform and still try to remain on time. And on that run at least, it's pretty much impossible to run a service on time if you're doing the whole run, or the full length of the line. But at the southern end with Elephants and Castle, it's not much better, because you only have 15 seconds to in theory get the whole train set up and the doors open and shut before you have to head off to Lambeth North and all the other stations on the line. I dare say that achievement there would be mainly relating to my experiences with the Nachfolger Dresden version of this engine, although from what I can tell, there's really no difference at all between this original Ruhr-Sieg Nord version and what you get with Nachfolger Dresden. Actually, it's also worth mentioning the is it Tauranga ramp Dresden to Chemnitz route. I saw yesterday on Facebook that Dovetail have confirmed that it will be released on January 13, which because of funny time zones and me being in New Zealand, it'll be January 14 when that route is released. I will probably be getting Dresden to Chemnitz and trying to do a few videos on it. Although I was not happy at all to see that DTG are including the BR143 with that route as well. So that'll be the third time they have used this ruddy thing it'll be the third time that they've included this ruddy engine with the route. And I like to think that it'll be the last, because I'm not saying that the BR143 is a bad locomotive, but I really do think that it's about time we started getting more new equipment, or like more brands new to the game, more rolling stock that is brand new to the game with these routes, instead of just copying and pasting engines from previous routes or add-ons a couple of times over. Although saying that, there is at least, although credit where it's due, I do like how DTG are at least including one new train with the route, which is the DB BR612, which is notable for a couple of reasons. One, it as being like the first of a couple of things for TSW. Firstly, it'll be the first German diesel multiple units we've ever seen in the game, and it'll also be the first tilting train we've ever seen in TSW. Speaking of tilting trains, I wouldn't mind seeing like the British Rail Advanced Passenger Train Experimental or APTE in the game, although I don't think there's any suitable routes for it available. Although you probably could just use, in that sense, you could probably just use a bit of artistic license and try to run the APT on Northern Transpennine at Manchester to Leeds route, except the real APTE only ran in the 1970s before being preserved by the National Railway Museum in 1976, and Northern Transpennine is set in 1983. And I just realised that I should be focusing on how far, on the distance to the next station. So I don't really want to risk overshooting the platform. Of course, you couldn't really, in this route at least, you couldn't really pull a Gordon and overshoot the platform and crash through the station wall, because none of the stations on this route are terminus stations. They're all through stations. I'm going to see if I can get a screenshot of this lot going into the tunnel. There's a lot of tunnels on this route. Close enough. Yeah, going back to the Dresden to Chemnitz route. Oh crap, we're going much faster than I thought we were. Going back to Dresden to Chemnitz and a brief discussion on that. I saw in this preview article that Dovetail had yesterday, there's a BR185 with some dead engines. It's a bit strange. Yeah, I saw in a preview article that DTG put up yesterday that it's not just the BR612 and BR143 that are being included with this route, but also another new variant of the BR185, because apparently it would be too much to ask to have like a Siemens Vectron locomotive in TSW, or something else that's not just a rehashed or updated version of the 185. But no, the one that they're including with Dresden to Chemnitz is something called a Rail Pull BR185/6, and I've never even heard of Rail Pull. So if anyone knows more about that company and what it actually is, then feel free to post below in the comments. And I do apologise if you struggle to hear me at some points, but I have been trying I have been trying to get the audio levels right before I started recording, and it seems to have, well, from what I was doing in testing, it does seem to have worked okay. And from what I've just been experiencing, there's not really a lot of track sounds. Now, I'm trying to... Now, can you actually... Yep, that's done it. Bit strange how there's that clear indicator for the light controls in the cab car, but not in the locomotive. Mind you, I suppose it's because I would assume it's because these Doppelstockwagen coaches are a lot younger than the locomotive. It's kind of strange just how common these Doppelstockwagen coaches are in these German routes now. I think just about all of them, except, although there's bound to be one that doesn't use them that I've forgotten. I can't think of a single German route in this game where you won't see Doppelstockwagen coaches. Oh, geez, 15 kilometers to the next station. That'll probably go by quicker than I expect. Oh wait, speed limit's going down to 70 very soon. So obviously there's no way we'd ever get up to 110 kilometers an hour before the 70 speed limit kicks in. But yeah, that station that we just stopped at was Werdohl. But again, apologies for butchered pronunciation. And also, jeez, certainly could have done better with this hillside scenery. Actually, perhaps this is where Rivet Games got their inspiration from when they did the scenery for the Arosa line. Although jokes aside, I do think the Arosa line is a bad route in TSW, which is kind of sad considering that the original Train Simulator version is actually pretty good. I'm not saying that just because the TSW version doesn't include the ABE 8/12 Allegra, and yet the original Train Simulator version does. But yeah, I just think, although I don't know, I can't necessarily remember exactly, but from memory, the distant scenery in TSW has certainly improved quite a bit since the early days of this route. And I didn't realise how old it actually was until I looked in the main menu and saw that there's an allotment. Jeff Marshall would be pleased. I didn't notice until I looked in the main menu to sit and saw that it was the third route from the bottom after Great Western Express and Rapid Transit. So that leads me to think that possibly Ruhr-Sieg Nord was like the third or fourth route to be released as a DLC for TSW. Because I think one of the really old routes was called Northeast Corridor New York, but I never had that route because I thought it was a right farce, because it was a very short and linear route that was just Newark International Airport to New Rochelle via New York Penn Station, and I thought that was just pathetic as for route coverage. Just like the Long Island Railroad, come to think of it. And yeah, and it's for that reason alone, of it being a very short and linear route, that I never had NEC New York. Curiously, that route was never remade, or was never put in the TSW2 Preserved collection. Although more recently we have seen the return of the Amtrak ACS 64 and the Amfleet coaches, but as part of the new Boston Sprinter or Boston to Providence route instead. I like the lights on the walls of this tunnel. I don't remember noticing them yesterday. But yeah, I just find that curious. Like just about all of the add-ons, the pre-TSW2 add-ons, are now usable in the newer rendition of the game as part of the Preserved collection. But I don't really, and yet for whatever reason, for reasons I'm not entirely sure on, Northeast Corridor New York, for some reason, was never brought into TSW2. Although speaking of Amtrak, I really do think there should be more representation of that railroad in the game. Hello, what's this coming towards us? That is... oh, that's a BR155. With some freight. Empty freight by the looks of it. Those look like log wagons. Although, as someone who has filmed a lot of the freight trains between Mount Maunganui and Kinleith, and by extension Kawerau as well, and even down in Napier now that I think about it, I have seen a lot of log trains and log wagons in my time, and none of them have like the big, for want of a better word, wall at each end. Whereas those ones that we've just seen obviously do have them. Obviously it's just presumably just different countries having different practices. Which is pretty obvious considering that New Zealand has 3-foot 6-inch gauge as their our main railway gauge, and yet I'm pretty sure in Germany it's 4-foot 8.5-inch or standard gauge. I don't remember. I think before I started driving on this route, I don't remember seeing a German route in TSW that has this many low speed restrictions and like winding curves and valleys and what have you. This certainly is. It may be an old route, but it certainly is. But it is by no means boring. Although I can understand if people wouldn't really want this sort of route if they don't like going slow most of the time. I think even something like rapid transit feels faster than this, even though obviously because that's more of a stopping metro, like an intense stop-start metro service. Well, not really a metro, but you know what I mean. More like commuter rail. That's probably a better way to put it. On that route, I think for the most part, like when you're actually in kind of the city centre of Leipzig itself, you certainly can't go that fast, especially when you're in the city tunnel. But I think when you're out in the countryside, going out towards Dessau Hauptbahnhof, pretty sure you can get up to like at least 160 km an hour when you're outside, or when you're on the northern side of Leipzig. On the south side, down to Markkleeberg, Schwitz, that's still relatively slow going as well. Although, come to think of it, this Ruhr-Sieg Nord route, sorry if you can hear that, I'm just scratching my head. Anyway, this Ruhr-Sieg Nord route, it really does remind me of like Main-Spessartbahn, although in the sense that both are German routes that winds their way through some often quite narrow river valleys, especially along here. But the major difference there, of course, is that I think Main-Spessartbahn, from memory, has steeper gradients, and despite the fact that that RSN here has generally lower speed limits, hello, this is a station. One that we're obviously not stopping at. Let's see which one this is. This is Altena Westfalia. I think that's what the West F is short for. Pretty sure it's Westphalia. I don't remember stopping at that station yesterday, but anyway. It's kind of funny. I just realised how strange it is that this route, or this RSN, despite being slower, doesn't have gradients as severe as MSB. Although speaking of MSB, the BR185/2 that was originally from this RSN route, that was copied and pasted over to MSB. But I think from memory the BR146/2 that you get with that route was new to TSW at the time. Although more recently, the BR146/2 has been copied and pasted over and included again with Nachwerke Dresden. Although from what I understand, it is somewhat prototypical, because I'm pretty sure the S-Bahn Dresden services are run with either 143 or 146 locomotives. And speaking of the 143, From memory, I think the reason why Dovetail were including it again with Dresden to Chemnitz is because obviously in real life they do run the S-Bahn Dresden S3 service, well, not just S3 but also the other two lines, and yeah, this newer route will include the entirety of the S-Bahn Dresden S3 line, which should make for an interesting driving experience. But I just hope that the trains from the Nachwirke Dresden pack, especially the Talent 2, can be seen on the Chemnitz route as like AI around Dresden Hauptbahnhof, because if not, then that would just look stupid and quite a bit and very inconsistent. It'll be like what we've got now with around Brighton station and how that's featured on the East Coastway and London commuter routes, and it's a bit strange how you go to Brighton when you're on the London commuter route, when you see like the Gatwick Express 3H7s, and then you go load up the same station on East Coastway, no 387s at all. And of course on East Coastway you just get the 313s and 377s. Yeah, you can definitely tell this is an older, you can definitely tell that Ruhr-Sieg Nord is an older route, because I'm pretty sure that since this one was made, Dovetail really have lifted their game on actually putting in traffic on these roads to make them look realistic. Like, not just realistically busy, but just any realistic amount of traffic on the road at all. In fact, I think Main Spessartsbahn was the first, from memory, I think that was the first route to incorporate a realistic traffic system. Hang about. Shouldn't that screen have more information on it? Or maybe that... I wonder if they have actually updated. I haven't really thought to look at it properly, but I think that... I'm pretty sure that the Nachwirke Dresden version, I think, does have more information on that screen than just what appears to just be the date and the time. Although, yeah, this is obviously an older rendition of the locomotive, so I'm not surprised that it's a lot more basic. Because obviously kept meaning to apply the brakes, but I had the wrong key on, so it kept holding on release, which was pointless because they already were released. Right, I just saw the speed limit's going up to 100 kilometers an hour. Now, I did say earlier that the highest speed that you can get up to on this route is only 120 kilometers an hour, and you can only get up, even then, you can only get up to that speed for a relatively short distance, up somewhere, I think it's between Letmathe and Hagen. So it kind of, to me, it certainly seems like a real testament to the slow and winding nature of this route. And I think 100 kilometers an hour, I think that's equal to about, what's it, 62 miles an hour. That's the point. I just realised I've been going this whole time without even opening the windows. Although generally I don't, because I can't help thinking that the wind noise would drown out me somewhat pointless commentary. Wait, hold on. So you can press the buttons there, but is it even possible to turn on this destination display? Auto set destination. Does that actually do anything? No, it doesn't. Why am I not surprised? I think in more recent times, I think Dovetail certainly sorted out this thing with changeable destination displays on these German engines. Something else I just realised I've forgotten to mention this entire time. Well, I think I've forgotten to mention this entire time, is that because this route now indirectly links up with Rhine-Ruhr-Osten at Hagen, what I'm going to do once I finish this run with the BR143 is continue on into Wuppertal with the DB BR422 on Rhine-Ruhr-Osten. And in that instance, you'll certainly see just how different the experiences of driving this locomotive are compared to driving a multiple unit. Especially one like the BR422, which has, from memory, has pretty crazy, or is pretty fast and responsive throttle and brake. That's curious. Is that... BR143 facing the opposite way to this one. I didn't realise that was the case, but that's just the way it is, I guess. What the hell? Only one coach? What on earth is that about? I have never seen that on any of these routes in TSW before. Like, just having the locomotive with one coach. I mean, that just seems really inefficient to me. I'm going to see if I can investigate that. That's the point. I forgot that you could go through you could actually walk through the interior of this thing. Kind of like the later ACS 64. Now it just says it's going to Hagen. Slightly strange. Although from what I can tell, our RE16 service has got priority over that really strange one-car shuttle. Hello, there's some wagons here. What are these? What type are these? Shimens? I think that's what it's meant to be, but don't quote me on that. I don't even know what goes in those wagons. I wonder if all this modelling here is with these fences on the platform. I wonder if that's meant to depict like a station that is undergoing some form of refurbishment. Because if not, then it looks very run down, and I wouldn't expect that from Germany, because I don't know too much about their railways and how they go about running them. But from what I gather, I think a lot of the stations are kept pretty clean. Right, so that was Letmathe, if I pronounce that right, and so that's our last intermediate stop. And the next one is Hagen, where we end this run. If I can get the speed selector to work, because sometimes you do have to be a bit finicky with this thing. Now, curiously, I've noticed that this old Ruhr-Sieg Nord version of the BR143 it actually accelerates rather quickly, which is not something I wouldn't really expect from a locomotive this old. And I think from memory, the later Nachfolger Dresden version is actually harder to drive, I think, because I swear the acceleration rate on that later version is actually slower than this one. Although, obviously, I'm not an expert on the BR143 locomotives, so I've got no idea how fast or slowly they would accelerate, or they accelerate in real life. Actually, that'll make for a good screenshot. If I can do one without shadows in the way. Insert Shadow Realm joke here. Okay, so we're coming up to 90, so I have to try and slow down for that in time. There's a bit of dynamic brakes there. Interesting. Something else that I just thought to mention is that I just noticed the CIFA thing in the numbers there for PZB, and I've just remembered how I never drive these things with any of the safety systems enabled. Hello, there's BR363 doing absolutely nothing. Try to screenshot that. And yeah, I never drive these engines with, or these German engines with any of the fancy signalling systems enabled, for the simple reason that I think they're simply far too complicated for me to understand. Even if I was to go through some form of, even if I was to go through a tutorial, like, I've just never been able to get my head around how, like, PZB works. I mean, I think CIFA is like a driver, like the German version of a driver vigilance device that you would see on, like, the UK, on British trains. But as for PZB, I've got absolutely no idea how that's supposed to work. There's quite a lot of crossings on this route, but as I pointed out earlier, there's the fact that there's no road, there doesn't appear to be any road traffic at all, does make this route feel rather lifeless. And I don't know if it's possible, but I do hope that at some point, if it is possible, that Dovetail can release an update or patch for this route where you do have, or where you do get realistic road traffic. But yeah, I think in that sense this route really is showing its age. Although even then I don't really know exactly when this was released, but I'll try to look that up and possibly put it in the description once as I'm uploading this video. Obviously you'll know whether or not I've done that if you do look in the description. Yeah, I've noticed that right now currently it's not that often that I do these sort of these unedited gameplay videos, because I've found that especially since I've found that some of the fully edited ones that I've done, especially that one I did the other day about when I was exploring the abandoned, well, not really abandoned, the disused Ruhr branch line, by my standards that was quite successful, although in my case I suppose any view you count over 100 within a day is impressive, but I honestly do not understand why this channel HUD is getting a disproportionate number of views in relation to the amount of subscribers it has. Although that's not to say I'm not grateful for, well, what am I saying? It's not to say I don't appreciate the views that I do get, because quite frankly, who wouldn't appreciate getting any views? I mean, I can't imagine why you'd, like, in a situation if someone was making videos for the site but not wanting to get any views or attention at all. Like, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of running a YouTube channel in the first place. I mean, I think a while ago I did hear some people say that you shouldn't necessarily do YouTube just for the views entirely. You should do it just because you enjoy the actual process of recording or editing videos. And in my case, it's a strange mix of both, to be honest. Although saying that, it's an extremely rare thing for any videos of mine to get more than 1,000 views. And I never know which videos will, if any videos will actually hit that mark. I just hope that at some point that it becomes a more common occurrence. Yes, I apologise for the awkward silence, but it's getting to that point where those are strange looking wagons. It's getting to the point where I'm sort of running out of ideas for what to talk about, because I certainly don't script these basic gameplay videos, and consequently I sometimes end up going silent. No, but I will say that this route, for the most part, does run really well, especially on my rubbish computer. Yeah, I've noticed throughout this run that it's been averaging... Oh, right when I was talking about good frame rates, it just had to lag! No, I've noticed that most of the time it's between like 30 and 40 frames per second. And I saw that even in some of the tunnels it's now going up to like... what's that? That's another 185. I noticed that in the tunnels sometimes it gets up to like 50 frames a second, which is a very rare thing for me. Or I would actually come to think of it, annoyingly rare thing. Hello, there's another BR143. That's the other thing, is that this original version of the engine that first appeared in the game is obviously in this DB Traffic Red, but then more recently DTG reskinned it, or repainted it, the engine in, or included the engine again with Nachwerke Dresden, but in a different blue and off-white livery. And they're reusing that same blue and off-white version with Dresden to Chemnitz for some reason. Why they didn't include an entirely new locomotive, like what they're doing with the BR612, really is beyond me. Like, just some of the decisions that Dovetail make in terms of like what they do and don't include with these TSW packs, I just do not understand. Especially since some of them are so dumb that you wonder how they could have, or how they thought that no one would notice or care. I mean, they're probably just thinking like it doesn't matter what we do and don't include, people will still get loads of money from it. And that wasn't a Harry Enfield reference, by the way. Yes, this, you can certainly tell that up near the Hagen end that the valley is certainly kind of opened out. It sort of reminds me of the section of Main Spessartbahn between like Aschaffenburg and I think Laufach, or around the Gemunden end. Well, that's not saying much because that route is also mostly like very steep and winding valleys, or valley routes rather. Yeah, I can't help thinking that this yard here should be a lot more, or should be, if that even is a yard, I can't help thinking that there should actually be some amount of additional rolling stock in there, because as it stands now it just looks and feels quite empty. And oh hello, I had no idea that, I did not realise that this was essentially one massive horseshoe curve. Well, I suppose you learn something new every day. Yeah, because I just realised that, I remember with Rhein-Ruhr-Osten, on that route you get a representation of RE4, which is an Aachen to Dortmund service, and I would assume, although obviously I don't know for certain, that route would branch off about there, or and go off that way, instead of this route, or it could be going off on that spur there, but don't quote me on that. I'm still a bit of a... My knowledge on German geography is still a bit pants, to be brutally honest. Right, not too far off from Hagen now, and as I said, I will be indirectly continuing on to Wuppertal in the next video with a DB BR422. I'm going to put that window blind down if I can. Not the whole way, of course. What's that engine over there? Oh, it's another 143 with those funny looking tank wagons again. That's the other thing is that I've found with these 143s is that they seem to be perfectly capable of hauling freight just as much as passengers. Is that another BR363? It is. No, they're a lot more... These things are a lot more common on this route than I thought they would be. It's not like Nachwirk at Dresden, where in that instance you only see the BR363 shuttling back and forth between Riesa and the chemical plant at Neunkreuz, which is basically the far northern end, up at the far north end of the route. And you certainly, in other words, you certainly won't see that engine in Dresden. And which kind of makes me wonder how the BR363 will be used on Dresden to Chemnitz. But as I've said before already, I just think that there should be a different shunter, or an entirely new shunter locomotive included with that route instead of just reusing the BR363 again. Don't know why I've ended up slowing down to now 28 kilometers an hour, because obviously there's no particular speed restriction for it. It's kind of like either the western or eastern approach into Essen Hauptbahnhof, where there's not really any particularly severe speed restrictions, despite the fact that you're approaching a major station. I think with like München and possibly even Köln, even though Köln Hauptbahnhof isn't a terminus station, yeah, München especially, that does have a severe speed restriction for when you're coming into and out of the platforms. Like I think in that instance, that's where you can only go up to 30 kilometers an hour until you've cleared the speed board. And yeah, coming to, after what doesn't really feel like a long time, even though by most people's standards it probably was, we're finally arriving at Hagen. And yeah, thank you for watching. I do hope that you've enjoyed my first attempt at covering the Ruhr-Sieg Nord route, and I hope that you'll stick around for future TSW videos from me, in the unlikely event that you might actually find them interesting. For now, I will leave you with this shot of the BR143 to close off the video. And yeah, take care everyone, and I will see you next time.